Welcome everyone to the Holiday Book Buzz with Elm Street Books. Again, my name is Laura Woodward-Cavers. I'm the reader advisor at New Canaan Library. And with me is Melissa Thorkilson. Did I say that correctly, Melissa?
Absolutely. Yep, spot on.
Okay. Melissa, would you like to say a few words and introduce your team?
Yes, I would. Thank you everybody for joining us. This is just really a very cool thing to be joining with the librarians and having this kind of book buzz talk. And I want to thank everybody who supports Elm Street Books during this holiday season. There's a little screenshot that tells you our hours. And also, I just want to let everybody know that you can order on our website. You can call the store and order books. We will be doing curbside pickup throughout the season for anybody who doesn't want to come into the store. And that's kind of my little news blast. But we are joined tonight by incredible booksellers, Heidi Mergian, who has read almost every book in the store, and Wes Romansky, who has read all the books that Heidi hasn't read in the store. And I'm very grateful that they would join me tonight and all of us tonight. And I'm really, really happy to be here and can't wait to talk to you all.
And I've switched the slide again. I'm Laura Cavers at New Canaan Library. My team is Kathy Blantz, who is the marketing librarian at New Canaan Library, and also Kathy Townsend, who is in the children's library. And I'm showing you this slide because you can see our hours are a little different than how we usually operate. Because of COVID, because of the pandemic, we have had to alter a lot of our hours, and we've also altered the interior of the library. We really do not have a lot of places for people to come in and sit. So it's really still just a browsing kind of a library. And at the moment we are open. I don't know if things will change, if hours will change because of the rising or the falling of the infection. So if you are planning to come to the library, you might want to just check our website. We will be putting up the latest information about our being open. But you will always be able to get a library book from us. We will, if we have to switch to curbside, we will switch to curbside. But right now we are open, and you are able to come in and take out books. And so with that, I'm going to start the show, so to speak. The first slide will be with children's. Here we go. Melissa.
Sure, thank you so much. So we're going to start out with children's picture books. And I just wanted to start off with Sophie Blackhall's, who is a Caldecott medalist, beautiful picture book, If You Come to Earth. And this picture book follows a young boy who imagines an alien and a letter that he would write to this alien about the wonders of Earth. It's just glorious. If you are familiar with Sophie Blackhall's illustrations, you will understand why this is such a special book. But it makes you proud to be part of the Earth and all of its diversity. And it's a book that the whole family will love and enjoy. The next book is, if everybody is familiar with Dan Brown of Da Vinci Code, but what you might not have known about Dan Brown is that he is a composer and a musician. And he has written this picture book, and I'm not usually a big fan of books with apps, but this one I'm going to make an exception because if you get the app for the book, Dan has composed music that goes with each one of the poems in this book that are poems about animals. But the poems are wise and witty and have great meaning without being preachy. And the symphony that he has composed with this book is glorious, and you really have to experience it. And last but not least, since it's the holiday season, the wonderful and hilarious Jimmy Fallon has written 5 More Sleeps Until Christmas. And this talks about a young boy's anticipation for that Christmas time and everything that you feel, and it sort of reaches out to the child in all of us, and you will recognize your own child's anticipation and excitement for the Christmas day in this book. So very cool. Buy it. Kathy.
So we need to switch the slide. Oop. Laura, can you change the slide? Uh-oh, we lost Laura. She's on mute.
You're on mute, Laura.
Slide. Kathy,
Well, until the slide goes up, I do want to tell you about a book which both Melissa and I had on our lists. And then because we had overlap, we both put other ones in to change it. And it is called The Ninth Night of Hanukkah. And I think you had originally had it up as well, Melissa.
Yeah.
So anyway, it is a wonderful book, and we don't have a slide of it, but it's a wonderful book about the ninth night of Hanukkah. It looks like Melissa's going to go look for it. And I just found this book delightful. Each night there's something that the family is doing, and they are sharing it with all the people in their apartment until they realize that they needed a ninth night of Hanukkah. It is a book, I just loved it. And I think it doesn't matter whether you celebrate Hanukkah or not. It is just a wonderful book. And while Laura is working at, there we go, trying to, they're getting down to the continuing the holiday theme is Santa Baby. And Santa Baby imagines what would happen if Santa was a baby. He's so tired and he just would, oh, I wish I had I'm getting old and tired and this is getting me hard work. I just wish I was a bit younger, but he forgets to say how much younger and he gets transformed into a baby. Well, that certainly causes some havoc around Christmas Eve, and the elves have a lot more work to do. And it is just a charming book called Santa Baby. I think you'll love it. And although we all know The Night Before Christmas, certainly it is a familiar book, and you probably have Night Before Christmas books at home. But this is a brand new edition, which I think is just wonderful. It is using the original words by Clement Moore, but the pictures celebrate 4 different homes. One of them is in the warm climate with palm trees. One of them is in a trailer park. One is way out in the rural area, maybe a farmhouse. And another one is an apartment in a city. And it shows how Santa comes. It alternates the pictures. There isn't always a chimney, so it shows what the family has done to adapt to that. And it is just a lovely, lovely rendition of The Night Before Christmas, and is certainly a good addition, or if you're getting a book for maybe a grandchild for their first time of a Christmas book, it would be a wonderful choice. And I see Melissa and I were thinking, we apparently do think alike. I also thought of the Wild Symphony, but the one I chose was the oboe goes boom, boom, boom. In this book by Colleen A.F. Venable, which I think she is basing on her father, there's a little girl named Felicity. And by the way, that F in Colleen A.F. Venable stands for Felicity. She plays the drum. And as they are telling about every single instrument in the orchestra, the woodwinds and the trumpets and the brass and the oboe and the flute, and the book explains exactly how those instruments work and how they make the beautiful sounds. And here is Felicity coming through each page going boom, boom, boom with her drum, until finally there is an instrument that is even louder than the drum. The thing I love about this book, I love the way that it explains exactly how each instrument produces the music that it does. And then there's funny little asides in it. For instance, on the trumpet page, there's a little girl talking, and the narrator is talking about the trumpet and all the toots that it makes. And the little girl, then the narrator says, Valerie, not those kind of toots. And I just think adults will enjoy this just as much as kids, as well as learning all about the different instruments. So Melissa, I think it's back to you now.
Right. Okay, so this book is wacky and crazy and wonderful. It is a science fiction-ish sort of Monty Python-esque, but for middle grade, called Dimension Y. And it takes place in both the 31st century and the 21st century, because the character Laura Ray sneezes her way into the 31st century and meets Phineas T. Fogg in the 31st century. And she meets a group of aliens who feel that she has the answer to why. Everything about the world, why. And so she doesn't really understand that, and Phineas doesn't understand that. But anyway, they get all caught up with these aliens and traveling through space, and it's wacky and wonderful and a must read. There's just nothing else like this. And I was telling somebody today that I was worried that somebody would come in and want to read this, and then they'd come in January and say, I want a book like Dimension Y. And there is no other book like Dimension Y. So it's terrific. Then there is The Silver Arrow. Kate asks her mysterious uncle, who's very wealthy, for a very expensive birthday present. And he gives her a steam locomotive. And her parents are not happy about it, but she and her brother go out to the backyard where the steam locomotive is and get on it that night. And surprise, surprise, it takes off, and the Silver Arrow takes them on an unexpected and wonderful adventure, and you will go along with it. And it's just a great fantasy adventure. Then into the realistic fiction, John David Anderson is one of my favorite authors. And maybe it's because I have two sons, but I feel like John David Anderson speaks boy. He has a terrific character who just is not a sports kid, but his dad is very competitive and into sports. And he and his dad go to a miniature golf course one day, and he turns out to be pretty good at miniature golf and really likes it. And his father says, great, we're going to get you a coach. So this book is sort of how that turns out. And it's about relationships and family and finding yourself. Really a terrific read. So that's that. On to you, Kathy.
Okay. And Laura, can you switch the slide?
Oh, wait, Kathy, did you mention? Oh, so this is when we should.
No, why don't you mention?
Okay. So another book Kathy and I intersected on was Lauren Wolk's Echo Mountain, historical fiction. And I feel like so many people do this, but you know, the character in this book, the main character, is a lot like Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird. She is a strong, wonderful young woman who finds her way and sticks up for herself. And Kathy, you should say more about it, because it's just, we love this book, and Heidi loves it too.
One thing I want to just say, someone had a question. What are the ages for these books?
8 to 12 is standard, you know, but it
Fourth grade through sixth.
Yeah, fourth grade.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, Laura, can you switch the slide? And as far as Echo Mountain, it takes place in Maine, sort of during the Great Depression, and a family has lost its home, and they end up sort of in the mountains of Maine. One thing I liked is that it's near where we happen to have a house, and up in the mountains, and so I could picture it very well. But Lauren Wolk is just a master. Her writing is beautiful, and she's just written some wonderful books. Hers are a little bit more sophisticated. You might think of that maybe for a 5th through 8th grader. I'm not sure if a 4th grader would get into it quite as much, but it's excellent, beautifully written book. I suspect it will be, hopefully we'll get some shiny medals on it at some point during,
Great.
yeah, during award season. I've chosen 3 books, and Melissa, I love the last shot. That's been a favorite book of mine this year too.
Yeah, I read it.
I've chosen 3 different books. One of them is probably well known, The Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Deep End. As you probably know, we had a wonderful event about a month ago, thanks to Melissa and the Elm Street book, with Jeff Kinney and promoting The Deep End. But if you happen to know some child who is in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and you just want to be the star under that Christmas tree, then you might think about getting them The Deep End. Kids love The Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It is probably the most circulated books in the library, or some of them in the children's room, and they will love The Deep End. So if you didn't know about it,
Autographed copies.
Oh yes, and yes, Melissa has autographed copies, which make it even more special. So I wanted to give a shout out for that. Now, Show Me a Sign is a beautifully written book, historical fiction. It takes place on Martha's Vineyard, and it tells the story of Mary Lambert. This is something I never knew about Martha's Vineyard. Apparently, it had a very large deaf population. 1 out of every 25 people was deaf. And as that happened, as that community grew, they were very comfortable both speaking English and signing so that everybody was comfortable. Communication was fine. So this book is taking place, I would say, around 1910, 1920, and maybe a little later. It's somehow never specified too well. But Mary Lambert is deaf, and as is the author of this book. And there is a researcher that comes to the island because they're very curious as to why there are so many deaf people on this island. And he ends up making Mary his sort of research subject. And there's a lot of, that's not a good thing. He's not a particularly honest, kind man. So this book deals both with the deaf, but also with the Wampanoag, I'm not pronouncing that right, Wampanoag population, because also on Martha's Vineyard, there was a large Native American population, and everybody got along very well. So or some did, and then there was also some racism. So it's a beautifully written historical novel, Show Me a Sign, and about a group of people that we don't know very much about, and you don't see much written about the deaf population. Now, the last book I chose is actually nonfiction, and I just finished reading this myself, and I've actually bought it for some Christmas gifts. It is All 13, The Incredible Cave Rescue of the Thai Boys Soccer Team. And if you remember about 2 years ago, this 13 boys from about age 11 to about 16 were trapped in a cave in Thailand with their coach, and they were trapped for a couple of weeks. And it's the story of how they came out and all 13 were saved. It is an amazing story. The book is so interesting. It has wonderful pictures, tells you everything about, how it happened, a little bit from the viewpoint of the students as well as from the rescuers. Just a fascinating read. It is nonfiction, but it certainly was interesting. Adults will like it, but I think also if you've got, your middle grade readers who really prefer nonfiction, which many of them do, it is an ideal choice for them. And also lets you know that there's some really wonderful nonfiction books written for young people. And Melissa, on to the next stage.
All right. So a deep fake is a very real and scary phenomenon. They are manipulated videos created by sophisticated artificial intelligence that can be used to make people believe something is real when it is not. In this story, a high school girl becomes a victim of a deep fake. And throughout the story, she has to figure out how she can convince people, prove her innocence. It's realistic fiction. It's very high school, but the whole concept is just so frightening. It's a great read for kids who like realistic fiction and high school drama. Probably, yeah. Anyway, moving on. Then there is The Downstairs Girl, totally different. This is a terrific book set in 18th century Atlanta. Jo Kwan is a Chinese immigrant who actually was born in this country, but she is a milliner, as assistant. She gets fired for racist reasons, and she has to seek other employment. So she anonymously applies for a job as a columnist. And what she writes in this column sort of makes Atlanta sit back. Of course, they have no idea that this young woman is writing this, but it's really an interesting period that's not really covered. And I love the character of Jo Kwan. And there's just a lot of intrigue and interest that goes on in this book. And it's definitely a must read for historical fiction buffs. So Elizabeth Wein, if you're a fan of Codename Verity, this is a terrific book. It takes place on the coast of England. And it involves a girl who is an orphan and who goes to this town and gets a job there. near a Royal Air Force base, never expecting that a German plane is going to crash, or I guess it doesn't really crash, I guess it just lands. And it is associated with an Enigma machine, a machine that translates German code. And there are a bunch of different characters that get involved with this. And it's also just, it's a great mystery in addition to being historical fiction. So great young adult reads, and age-wise, I would say any 12 and up. There's nothing inappropriate for a strong 12-year-old, but there's enough interest in all of these books that would capture 16 or 17-year-old, and complexity as well. So, Kathy?
Hey, now I have to admit, I am not a huge young adult reader because my specialty really is middle grade. So I had to talk to some of my colleagues at the library, my young adult colleagues, to ask them what were some of their favorite books for this season that I might recommend. And these were 3 of the books they gave me. Now, I am currently reading A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. And this is about a girl who goes to a school somewhere in Fairfield County. The town is called Fairview, but it could certainly be New Canaan. And I'm told that New Canaan is mentioned in the book, which is why I wanted to read it. She is doing for her capstone project as a senior in high school, she is investigating a murder where a young girl from that high school had gotten or disappeared. They assume she was murdered, but she's disappeared. And this, by the way, reminded me a little bit of the Jennifer Dulas situation. She has disappeared and someone has been accused of the murder. And this girl, Avery, she wants to investigate and learn the truth. So as she digs deeper and deeper into the situation, things are not as they seem, as always happens. And she eventually does solve the murder. I won't give it away because I'm only halfway through the book, but I'm really enjoying it. And I love the fact that it takes place here in Fairfield County, and I'm just waiting for New Canaan to show up in it. Maybe Melissa, maybe you know if it does. I don't know.
It actually does, and it's a terrific read. It really is. It's a good murder mystery, and the Fairfield County aspect of it is super fun. And New Canaan does in fact show up in the book.
Okay, I'm not there yet, so I guess I'll have to keep reading. Cemetery Boys was recommended both by Marie and by Laura, by Kathleen. And in this book, Yadriel is in a traditional Latinx family, and he's having problems accepting his true gender. And so he ends up, with the help of a cousin, performing a ritual in the cemetery where he ends up finding the ghost of a murdered cousin to set it free. It's got a little bit of mystery because they need to solve what happened to this boy that got murdered and what's the real story, as well as coming to terms with his own sexuality. It's gotten wonderful reviews as far as the characters and the writing of it. I have not read it yet, but it has come highly recommended by several of our teen librarians. And then finally, the Inheritance Games. And this one, I can't wait to read. This one, in this book, I had the wrong name before. This is the one with Avery. Avery really wants to get out of her situation. And so she wants to get a scholarship. She wants to survive high school and get out. And this mysterious letter comes that this billionaire has died and is leaving her the entire fortune. But she has to go to the Hawthorne mansion. There are 4 Hawthorne boys who don't think that she should be getting this inheritance. And she must solve some riddles and clues and a whole mystery where there's secret passages and puzzles to figure out. It reminds me of the Westing Game, which was always a favorite book of mine. And it's one that I can't wait to read. The more I've read about it, the more I want to read it. So I hope you'll like it too. And I think we're on to adults now, is that right?
Hi. In the interest of time, I will try to be concise, but if any of you know me and have been in Elm Street Books, you understand that I get extremely emotional and passionate about my books. So I will begin with one of my favorites, which is The Mountains Sing. And let me pronounce her name correctly because she's incredible. It's Wein Mai. This is her first book in English. It is a very poetic and lyrical family narrative. It is told over a half a century in Vietnam, from land reform through the Vietnamese War. It is told from the perspective of a grandmother and her coming of age granddaughter. Grandmother being extremely courageous, having to undergo extreme difficulties trying to protect her 5 children through that time. I'm not going to summarize this story or the series of events, because this book has so much in it that you want to just savor it and let it bloom like a flower, because it really is lush. And it is a perfect love letter to the Vietnamese people and their beautiful, beautiful country. And I know many people have been to Vietnam. I have not, unfortunately, but I hear it is absolutely breathtaking. So please, if you cannot travel to Vietnam, read about it. It's fabulous. My next book is another historical fiction novel. This takes place in India. It's called The Henna Artist by Alka, Joshi. This is a story of a woman, Lakshmi, who flees a very abusive husband and travels to Jaipur, which is a very colorful city, I've been told, to become a very celebrated henna artist to the wealthiest women in Jaipur. At the same time, she creates all these potions and sweets and teas for whatever ails women during that time. So I don't want to call her kind of like a witch, but she's kind of a medicinal healer as well. Well, lo and behold, her sister shows up that she just recently learns about, and who is extremely different from Lakshmi and turns her world completely upside down. And you can tell that she's going to have to struggle to keep the life that she has built in Jaipur going, because her sister is really going to try and challenge her during this whole time. This is a wonderful, lush, colorful story of India, and it really promotes the power of family and strong women characters. The third in this segment is very different from the other two. This is called Migrations by Charlotte Mcconaughey. This book begins with Franny, who is a very troubled woman with a very mysterious past, who arrives in a remote area of Greenland to follow the migration of 3 Arctic terns who migrate from Greenland to Antarctica every year. She convinces a fishing captain to take her aboard because there are no more fish left to be found. And she feels that if he follows these birds with her, they will lead them to fish. So it's basically shorebirds equal fish. So it's a win-win situation. It's a nautical adventure action story. Has an environmental twist to it, and it really portrays the resilience of humans as well as animals. And I'm just going to give you a quick fact, but before I do that, the minute I finished this book, I literally wanted to go back to page 1 and start it all over again. But a quick fact is that Arctic terns live 20 to 30 years. They travel in their lifetime about 1.5 million miles, and which is an equivalent to 3 round trips to the moon. So they're very resilient. It's a great book about resilience. Please read it. You will be captivated, and it is glorious. It really is.
Oops. Here we go again. There. Whew. Well, thank you everyone for sticking with. I'm the clicker that doesn't seem to be able to click through the slides well. So I'm very sorry that there are some lags in the presentation. So the three books that I've chosen, the first one is a book by Anna Burns. It's a Man Booker Award. I believe it was last year, or maybe that says 2018. It was a Man Booker Award, of which I decided I'd never read a Man Booker Award before, and I just picked it up and just started reading it, not knowing what I was getting myself into. And oh my goodness, it is a book that is, it's only for the very astute reader. I'll give you a little warning about that. It's a book about Ireland, about the Troubles. So this book will be for people who love Ireland, and it's about the Troubles. So it's about, you know, the sort of the conflict going on there. It takes place in Belfast. And it's a coming of age story also, because the narrator of this, the protagonist, is a 19-year-old young woman, and about that age, maybe 17, 18, 19. And she is just beginning to realize what is happening. You know, being in childhood, she sort of was kept away from what was happening in Belfast. But now as she was emerging and she had a boyfriend and she was getting out and she was going to school, and that she was noticing what was happening because someone accused her of having an affair with the milkman. And the milkman is the opposition leader. And if you remember about the Troubles, the story is written in a way that it's almost in code, because what happened in Ireland at that time, if you remember, people thought that their houses were bugged. And the story is written as if she's sitting at a kitchen table and you are sitting across the table from her, and she is just ranting about what is happening to her and her family and her boyfriend. And she is just on this spill of sort of, I wouldn't say anger, but just this real spitting, cutting kind of language that a teenager uses as they're talking about their life and how miserable it is. And she starts to talk in codes where she can't use people's names. She cannot talk about certain places, so she calls them funny things. And you're piecing this together, and it wasn't until I think page 30 that I realized I was in Belfast, this was the Troubles, and it was Ireland. But it's because of the writing that I became so fascinated to read it. I have an MFA in creative writing, so it's sentence structures, which actually there's almost no sentence structures in here. It's almost no sentences. They go for pages, or it's a very close read. But once you get involved in it, once you understand her dialect, once you understand how she's in this kind of excited state of speaking, you're with her. And you will just, it ends so sweetly. It ends in this amazing sort of an arc of family triumph in a way that it's the most remarkable book I think I've ever read. So very astute readers, if you have someone who loves, if you have someone that loves Faulkner or loves to read Marilyn Robinson, Anna Burns is perfect for them. They would love that book. The next book, The River, is actually more of an adventure book and a thriller book. And it moves very quickly. And it's about two gentlemen. Actually, they're college age, and they get together. They're friends, and they're going to take a trip on a river up through the Yukon, up toward the Hudson Bay. And so they're really just having a vacation. Now, this river is it's quite desolate, and it's, you know, the Yukon, that's way up there. There's not a lot of people that are, you know, using that as a river for vacationing. And so they pretty much feel that they're going to be the only ones on the river. And as they're paddling along, they notice there's two other paddlers, boats, but separate parties on the river. And one night they are camping on the side of the river, and they hear a scuffle, an argument between what they think is a husband and wife. And then the next time that they paddle down the river and they go to the next campsite, they see that someone is very badly hurt. And that person that's very badly hurt is the wife. And they have to, I mean, she is so badly hurt, they have to get her to a hospital, but they are way out in nowhere's land. They have to paddle down the river to get to a hospital, but that's hundreds of miles away. So they're trying to help her. But meanwhile, there's also someone who is not, you know, they're thinking that this person thought that they had killed her. And that was the intent. So they started to worry about being down on the river, and they're trying to get down the river while they're trying to hide from these two other boat parties, because they don't know which one had done anything. And they're trying to get down the river. Meanwhile, there's a forest fire coming. So as you can see, it just sets up for a wonderful thriller. If you are someone that enjoys adventure, if you enjoy, you know, any kind of river stories, or just having to, you know, survive, this is definitely a book for that type of a person. The next book, Run Me to Earth, is actually a story. It's a war story. It is about Laos during the bombing in the 1960s. So this goes back to the Vietnam War era. And it's about three orphans who they start to work in a medical doctor takes them in, and they start to work in this little clinic. And they are literally going out into the bombed fields, and there are still live ordnance out there to pick up the people who are alive and bring them back to the clinic to get help. They also go out to try and get supplies, and trying to find the supplies from bombed out medical vacs, medvacs that have been bombed, but they can still get some of the supplies out. So it's a very dangerous, interesting read. But at the same time, they are trying to flee and get out of, because they're children, the medical doctor has found a helicopter to get them out. But to get out, they have to, it's another one of these thrill rides. You're off on the motorcycle as they are trying to get away. And as they get away, something happens to them. They get separated. I'm not going to tell you too much more, but things get separated so that the story then moves to someone who finally does make it to France and is trying to contact the two other orphans to see where they are. It is a absolutely thrilling, but also beautifully written, almost mystical kind of a story. And it really does bring back if you have knowledge of the Vietnam War and Laos, it brings back just what the heck was going on over there. You just can't believe what the bombing that was happening over there. So it's a great book. Okay, next, let's see if I can do this one without any trouble. All right, Kathy, you're up.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start with Shuggie Bain because I have been obsessed with this book from the moment I picked it up, which was way back in the summer before there was any talk or buzz about it. So maybe that was part of it because I hadn't heard everyone's reviews, and I think everyone knows it won the Booker Prize this year and has been shortlisted for a number of other prestigious literary prizes, and so it does deserve it. I think everyone at the library was sick and tired of me talking about it and pushing it on them, but it is a lovely, lovely story. It is autobiographical. It is a novel, but the author, Douglas Stewart, it is pretty much his life as he grew up in Glasgow. with a mother who was alcoholic. And the basis of this story is a family setting. It's gritty. It's in late 1970s, 80s, Glasgow and the surrounding areas. The time of Margaret Thatcher, where there was a lot of unemployment, a lot of drug use, a lot of problems and poverty. And it's really a love story between this young boy and his mother, and his siblings, his brother and sister, they each have one foot out of the door, but he is the youngest and he is devoted to her, and he pretty much sustains her through her ups and downs, her alcoholism. And it is an absolutely beautiful story. And I would recommend this to anyone who wants to read this. Actually, all three of my books are by non-American authors, which is what I tend to like to read, because I feel like there's a different perspective from American authors, which is not to say one is better or worse, but there's definitely maybe a different way of approaching things. The Night Boat to Tangier. Kevin Barry is an Irish author. I had not heard of him. It's the first book of his I've read, and now I think I want to get my hands on everything he's written, because apparently he's a very prolific author. This book starts out in the kind of shady waiting room for a ferry boat in the south of Spain. And it's two aging Irishmen with a history of being involved in a lot of illicit activities. And they're sitting there waiting because they're trying to find one of their names are, it's Charlie and Maurice. And they're trying to find the daughter of Maurice. Her name is Dilly. She's estranged from them, and he is desperate to rekindle their relationship. So they're waiting for the ferry boats to come in and out, because she's involved with a group of young people who spend their time going back and forth to Tangier. And while they're sitting there, they pretty much go down memory lane. And it's full of the kind of beautiful poetic language that the best Irish authors are known for. And it's beautiful phrases about terrible men and terrible things in their lives, but there's a sweetness to it that transcends all the bad deeds and all the things in their past. So that is another very, very interesting book to look into.
There's Kathy, excuse me, I'm just going to say that was a book Kathy asked me to read as well. And what I loved about it, it was really two men talking about things that are important to them. And that's something that you don't really get a lot in a lot of books, is two men just talking about being men and being bad and being, but then
no, you're correct.
Find the daughter. And they're all very, I just thought
those two men had a deeper relationship than the man and his daughter, or to their wives or anyone else. They were like almost like a married couple. Yeah. Correct, Laura? In the way they spoke to each other.
It was very interesting to read that. I loved it.
Yeah. Wonderful book. And I do have to see what else he's written. He's written a lot, and maybe the rest of you have read things by Kevin Barry, but incredible writer. Deborah Leva, she's another one of my very great discoveries. If anyone's read Hot Milk, that was one of her books, and she was shortlisted for a number of prizes, among them the Booker, I believe. The Man Who Saw Everything. It spans 30 years. It starts with a young man named Saul, who's trying to recreate the Beatles' crossing of Abbey Road. He wants his photographer girlfriend to take a photograph because he's about to leave for East Germany. It's about late 1980s, prior to the fall of the Berlin Wall. And he's bringing it as a gift to his translator's sister, because she's obsessed with the Beatles. And while he's doing that, he's hit by a car and he's grazed by it. He's not badly injured. But the interesting thing is he goes off to Germany, and while he's there, he leaves a relationship with the photographer. He's in love with her, and then he promptly falls in love with his translator. So there are questions of his sexual identity, questions about political, it deals with East versus West. The whole setting of World War II, post-World War II Germany, East Germany, just prior to the fall of the wall. And then it takes you there 30 years later. He ends up as a much older man, also in the hospital, having a similar car accident. And I have to say that the interesting thing about this book was I wasn't quite sure at the end of it what was real and what wasn't real, and what he was imagining and what had actually happened. And I found that in a number of her other books as well. She seems to be someone who writes about somewhat disorienting topics, but in such a beautiful way that you can't stop reading it. She's a poet, she's a playwright, she's obviously a very accomplished writer, and all of that comes through in her books. So 3 top suggestions there.
Okay, next one. Okay, Heidi, you're up again.
All right, I'm up again. I'm going to start with 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. This book is an homage to the classic thriller. In this book is set in wintry New England, so think January, February, where it's really cold and dank and everybody's kind of huddled together. Everybody in this book is hiding something. It begins with a independent bookstore owner by the name of Malcolm Kershaw, who creates a list of his 8 perfect murder mysteries in his bookstore, i.e. Double Indemnity, Strangers on a Train, some Agatha Christie, ABC Murders, etc. Well, all of a sudden, there are 3 murders being investigated by an FBI agent that are eerily similar to those on his list. So Malcolm becomes suspect number 1, and somehow he becomes a very unreliable narrator because he's connected to some of the people that are unfortunately dying. So this is a delicious twist and turn thriller. I loved it, loved it, loved it. And you're going to want to read all those classic mysteries that are mentioned in this, because they are 8 perfect murders, if you think about it. So this is a good one for this time of year after Christmas. Anyway, the next one, I'm going to stay in the thriller category with Lisa Jules, The Invisible Girl. Now, if you've ever read Lisa Jules, she's extremely readable. She's British. It's just, the pages just flow. This is a psychological thriller, and it tells the story of a young teenage girl by the name of Sapphire who goes missing within a neighborhood that she knows very well, within a neighborhood where her therapist lives, the family, obviously, of the therapist lives, and this very odd, lonely gentleman that lives in this house all by himself. They all become suspects, and then those suspects in turn start to question each other, and they become suspicious of each other because they all know Sapphire in some way, shape, or form. So there's incredible pace in this book. The tension just increases and increases, and every time I thought I figured it out, I was stumped and I was led down a dead end just to have to turn around and go start all over again. I absolutely love this. I read it literally in 2 days, maybe a day and a half, because I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning reading it one night. Now, this is where the passion comes in. This is my favorite book that I've read of 2020. This is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Some of you may know her as a fantasy writer for young adults. She's extremely accomplished. Her writing is spectacular. I have to say, I was not prepared to love this book the way I did, and I'm going to linger a bit on it because if anybody walks into this store and they ask me what is the first book that they should read, this is the one I go for. It's a story about Addie, who makes a Faustian deal with the devil because she doesn't want to marry somebody. She's completely saved from this arranged marriage by asking the devil for a wish. Little does she know, she asks for life eternal, but he acknowledges it and he graces her with that wish, but in that, she will never be remembered. So she could walk into Elm Street Books and we'd say, hello, Addie. And she'd walk out, and then she'd walk back in, and we would wonder who she was. That's how quick she's forgotten. She survives by hiding and thieving. It takes place in the beginning in the 17th century in the French countryside, and it takes her all the way through to New York City 2014, which is a span of 300 years. I'm going to tell you, people say, oh, it's fantasy, I don't know if I can do that. This is about love. This is about love and what matters most. It's profound. It is, and I just can't put words into it. I'm so moved by this book, and I've had customers say that they've read it and it's been in their top 5. So I will call them and I will give you their names if you need to know. But anyway, as the title suggests, The Invisible Life of Addie, she is not invisible. She is literally unforgettable, and I will never, ever forget this character. Please read Addie. She's amazing. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Wes, you're up. We're now on to nonfiction. I just like to let everyone know that's in the audience that this slideshow that you're watching, I am going to be sending it to you via email. I have your emails from your registration, so you will be getting this slideshow, and you can see all the books that we've been talking about. Okay, Wes, go right ahead.
All right. Good evening, everyone. When I do the nonfiction books, I always like to start with the credentials of the author because they merit truism, etc. So I'm going to start with Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. And his credentials are, he's written for Outside Magazine, Scientific American, The Atlantic, The New York Times, and this is his 5th book. And it explores the new science of a lost art, which is breathing, and how we have forgotten to breathe through our nose. And as everyone can attest, you cannot deny that breathing is essential. So the author states, the humans are the worst breathers in the animal kingdom. And that has occurred mainly because of evolution, speeded up, especially in the last 300 or 400 years. But this book starts out with following his 10-year journey to alleviate his debilitating breathing problems that he actually goes to Stanford University medical facilities to have it cured. And the narration details that mixture of medical and scientific testing in his search for remedies, as well as his alternative ancient breathing techniques that he explores that is in various forms. And the book starts with a wonderful inscription from a stele in China that is from 500 BC that links all types of breathing together. The book is full of interesting tangents throughout, and it really is for anyone who has problems with asthma, sleep apnea, and other respiratory ailments, plus anyone who's interested in yoga and meditation, and generally anyone interested in wellness and just breathing better. In fact, while I was listening to everyone, I was over here doing one of his exercises. The next book is America in the World, The History of U.S. Diplomacy and Foreign Policy by Robert Zoellick. He has amazing credentials. He's a senior fellow at Harvard Kennedy School of Business. He's been president of the World Bank. He's been deputy secretary of state and has held numerous high government positions spanning 6 presidencies. What this book really looks at is the 5 diplomatic traditions established by secretaries of state and presidents from Ben Franklin to Reagan and Bush. Got to backtrack just a little bit because, as everyone probably knows, Elm Street Books' probably most popular popular political biography now is Obama's book. But and the second is the one about James A. Baker, the man who ran Washington, is a distant second, but also very well about when Baker served under Reagan and Bush. But this leads up to all the more current aspects of diplomacy that the U.S. has been following for the last, say, 30 years. And besides, compelling content and wonderful historical tidbits, such as why the Boxer Rebellion is named such. What makes this tome easily accessible is that it can be read in blocks, and you don't have to sit down and read it all at once. You can pick it up and put it down. Say, if you want to just read the segment on Truman, where the U.S. goes from a longstanding isolationist policy of no foreign entanglements since the revolution, to becoming a formal player on the world stage. You can read that, put it down, come back 5 days later, and pick up the next segment and read on about different aspects of the diplomacy. Other than an occasional flashback to my 11th grade American history class textbook, because the font in this book is the same as that one, and why I remember that after 50 something years, I don't know why. But the content in America in the World is never pedantic and reads very easily. So that is my choice for American history book of this year. Missionaries by Phil Clay is a novel because the other nonfiction book I was going to do at this point was on 100 hikes that you must do by National Geographic, but the book is published or out of stock already. So I'm picking up this fiction book that has a lot of nonfiction overtones. So Phil Kay did a debut novel called Redeployment in 2014, and it won the National Book Award. It also won the Book Critics Award for debut fiction, and was cited as the New York Times 10 best of that year. And he can speak from experience because he is a U.S. Marine Corps Iraq war vet. So he understands the battlefield. This novel, in a way, is hard to characterize because it's not an international thriller. It's not a mystery. It's not popular fiction. And what it is, though, is a thorough and incisive look at the globalization of war and how it translates down to the very local. In this case, it's through 4 interwoven stories and 4 different characters, being in Afghanistan and in Colombia. And it depicts how war now is no longer clean and is not of clean boundaries. That, let's say, it's just not straightforward and honorable anymore. And maybe it never was, but it's now never that case. I do have to say it is brutal at moments, but is always insightful. And it's a book that invokes Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness and Norman Mailer's, it's not Armies of the Night, but whatever the book is about Vietnam, which seems to be a theme tonight. Anyway, those are those 3, and I'll be back for another 3 later.
Thanks, Wes. So I have 3 books that at the library, when people are wanting to have something different, many times people, when they come to the library, they're always looking for some of the same old, but then they'll say, but I want to do something a little different. And I always put this next book in their hands. It's called The Stranger in the Woods. And it reads very easily. Michael Finkel is a memoirist and a journalist. I believe he writes a lot for the Atlantic. but he has taken a story, a true story about the last hermit, true hermit. And he talks about this hermit. This hermit was found, but he lived in the woods for more than 20 years. And he lived in the woods of Maine all year long, all alone. And for 21, or maybe it's 27 years. I've forgotten but I know it's more than 2 decades. And the thing that's interesting about it is that he describes a boy that he was fine in school, he was fine at home, he was a little quiet, but no known kind of setbacks or being bullied or a romance going badly that he wants to all of a sudden go off into the woods. And so he describes what he did. He just decided one day, Christopher Knight decided one day to just keep on driving. And he drove right by his house. And then he drove right up into the woods of Maine. And then when he was on he went smaller roads and then smaller roads and then smaller roads until he got to a little entranceway, a pathway, and he drove into that pathway, and he drove and he drove and drove along that pathway, and then he drove into the woods as far as he could go. And then he got out of the car, threw the keys on the dashboard, and kept walking into the woods. And he did that 27 years ago, from when he was found. And why? Nobody knows why. And he never contacted his family. So his family didn't know what happened to him. He just literally disappeared. And so there's all these amazing questions that you start to think about. Why did he do this? What does his family think? And the thing that's curious about it is that also he was such a good hermit that could hide very well. He was where they found his little place, his enclave, I don't know if it was a cave, but he was all set around in some rocks that were just a few yards from a summer camping area, not camping area, but where people in their summer homes around a nice little lake. And that he was there each year, and they knew he was there, but they kept going into the woods to find him, but they couldn't find him. And they knew he was there because he kept stealing from them. And he would steal mattresses. He would steal televisions. He would watch television in winter. He would steal car batteries. And he would take these things. It was so amazing. And you're just like, wow, this is the most amazing story. And then what's also interesting about the book is that the author goes a bit of history about hermits, and that they were, in some cultures, they were considered almost gods, or that, and they were literally walled into, a wall was built around them next to a church. And they had people that would come and take care of them and just give them food and then take away what waste they want, just took that away. They kind of took care. So it was a very interesting book about a hermit. And this is a true hermit. He was found, and because he had stolen from the homeowners. He had to go through, court proceedings, and he went to jail. And then I think he had to do community service and all these sorts of things. And why did he do it? And how did his family feel about him being missing for so long without him ever wanting to contact them? And it was this interesting story about some people just want to be left alone. And then there are also some people that want to get away from it all. And there's, so it was a very, very, and everyone that came back to me just said, that was the most amazing, quick, interesting read. They loved it. The next book, American Wolf, is if there's an environmentalist in your family, this is a wonderful book for them to read. It is about the reintroduction of the wolves to Yellowstone National Park. And the book starts out with sort of a description of one particular wolf. Her name is 06. She's a female, and she has a particular range that a lot of photographers like to go and take pictures, and they catch her in these beautiful, just beautiful, stunning photos of '06, in the background, or with her cubs, or in a kill type situation. And she's really just this marvelous specimen of an American wolf. And then the book goes on into the hard work that the environmentalists had to do to introduce the idea of bringing wolves back to Yellowstone, because you also have the ranchers that don't want that to happen, and then you have the wildlife groups that don't understand how the wolf is going to all of a sudden upset everything that's already happening at Yellowstone. And you start to learn a lot about the management, well, the necessities of the wolf, but also the necessities of how all these three factions have to work together. And at first you have a lot of, you get into courtrooms, the book does get into a lot of policies, and you never think that this would be interesting, but it was fascinating to understand the hard work it is to change environmental policy so that they're going to benefit, changing ideas, changing thoughts. So this is a wonderful book. If you have anyone in your family that enjoys, or a friend that enjoys environmental issues, this is really, really interesting. And then the next book, The Perfect Horse, we have so many World War II buffs in the library. They love the next kind of World War II story, that this is an interesting story that not a lot of people think about or know about, is that just like the Germans wanted to steal all of the artwork from the museums and from the Jewish people, but also the perfect horse, the Lipizzan stallion, was also one of Hitler's. He wanted that stallion. He wanted to get that stallion and have it. And then he wanted to do eugenics on it, change it, make a super horse out of the Lipizzan. And so Austria, the story is the Lipizzan are in Vienna, and Austria considers the Lipizzan stallion as one of their national treasures. And so when they hear that Hitler is wanting the horse and to take it for himself, and there's about 300 of these Lipizzan stallions in Vienna, that they have to start making contingency plans to hide them. And to not go into too much detail, because I don't want to tell you a lot about the story, but there is this one scene where they are taking the 300 horses out of Vienna, because the Russians are coming from one side, the Germans are coming from the other side, and if the Russians get to them, the horses will be eaten, but if the Germans get them, the horses will be taken. And they're trying to get them away, and they're going along. There's a woman in Bavaria that says, hide them in my castle. And so they're trying to get to this castle, and there's a German regiment. And so they have to make all the 300 horses flee. They just run off into the woods freely, just run. So it's this amazing story about horses running for their lives. And then the next day, peasants wake up and they look out their door, or farmers, and they see a white horse on their front door, and their front step, and they're just like, we have to hide them. And they would. They cover them with black paint. They bring them into their house. Some of them did. Some of them. I mean, this is the just this unbelievable story. So, and then just to let you know, Patton does get involved. Patton finds out that these horses, the Germans finally do get the horses. They do get them. Patton rescues them. Anyway, that's all I'm going to tell you. It's a wonderful. Did you ever know that this was a World War II story? It's
Laura.
brilliant. Yes.
Laura, just to let people know, if you have young people that are interested in that story, there is a young person's version written by the same author called The Perfect Horse, written for younger readers. A fascinating story.
Great. All right, so that's it for me. Kathy.
All right, I'm going to start with Win at All Costs, because my husband is currently reading it and he's given it rave reviews. So I'm going to get into that. This is a book for all the hardcore runners, sports enthusiasts, the people who love the idea of learning about the corporate cultures. And it does not particularly put Nike in a very good light, but the author, Matt Hart, is a very well-respected journalist, and it is based on his 2017 front page story for the New York Times on the famous, or I should say infamous, running coach, Alberto Salazar. And what happened was Matt Hart received a stolen USB drive with a lot of information on a report done by the United States Anti-Doping Agency that was looking into Salazar and Nike's Oregon Project, which was their running team that they were training young athletes. And I won't get into all the insides of it, but basically these whistleblowers delivered the information. Matt Hart did the story, and this is the full expose into the Nike win-at-all-cost culture and Alberto Salazar. So this is for the sports enthusiasts in your life. Moving over to Memorial Drive, I'm currently reading this and it's breathtaking. Natasha Truthaway is a Pulitzer Prize winning poet, and she has twice been the poet laureate for the United States. So that kind of speaks to the level of the writing of this story. It is based, or centers around, I should say, her mother's murder by her stepfather in 1985, but it begins way back when she's a child. It begins slowly. When I first started reading it, I wasn't so impressed by it, but it builds slowly and it really is layered. And it's very much a book for these times. It relates to the Black Lives Matter movement. It talks about civil rights, about women's rights, domestic abuse, striving to do better in your life and transcending where you are. And it's just a very, very beautiful story. Her writing is exquisite. So I would highly recommend this. For people who love memoirs, this is a special one. Actually, all three of these books would be excellent for book groups. There are a lot of layers, there are a lot of questions, a lot of discussions that could be had about all of them. Caste is somewhat like, well, I would say what Heidi said earlier about her choice about her book about Vietnam. There is so much in this book, I can't even begin to get into the depth of it. Basically, Isabel Wilkerson, she is also a Pulitzer Prize writer, and she is talking about the American caste system, which is how she feels that basically how Black citizens have been treated, that they are the victims of a caste system that has existed for a very, very long time. And she likens it to, she doesn't liken it to, she speaks about 3 caste systems in this world that are related. One being the caste system in India, the second being the Nazi Germany's caste system, and this being the third caste system. And she goes back and forth relating them amongst each other. It is so heavily researched, but it is written like a story. So it's not a book that is hard to read because her writing is so, I would say, nuanced and approachable that you feel as though you're almost reading a novel more than a nonfiction book. And I look forward to finishing it. It's taken me a long time. It's not something to read lightly, but it is, again, as one of the nonfiction books Wes was just talking about, you can put it down and pick it up again, and you will not lose anything. You will just continue on with it. So those are my choices.
Okay, Wes.
Okay, we'll wrap it up quickly. Anyway, these 3 books are all in paperback at this point, and 2 were published last year, and 1 was published a few years ago, but they're worth noting. So the first one is Underland, A Deep Journey in Time by Robert Mcfarlane. I mean, he's done numerous books on nature and people and places, and he's won the E.M. Forster Prize for Literature by the American Academy of Arts and Letters. And I got interested in it because, my wife and I have traveled all over the world, from rounding the Horn to bicycling through the Mekong Delta, to doing a safari in Botswana, to seeking the Northern Lights above the Arctic Circle in January. And then last year I did a 16-day river trip down the whole length of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. But I have never done anything extensively underground, which is what this book is all about. It offers an in-depth trip to various places throughout Europe that include the catacombs below Paris, which were used as burial places as a ceremony, as the cemeteries filled up after the mines were mined for different limestone for buildings in Paris. It also goes to mines under the North Sea for gypsum. It goes into mines where scientists are searching for dark matter because the Earth will filter out everything but the it's not muons or protons, but or neutrinos, but something like that. It also goes to the World War mountain cave system on the border of Italy and Croatia, to the drawings done by prehistoric man on the coast of Norway. So, and for these armchair adventures in the book, since I'm slightly claustrophobic underground, I am happy to be in an armchair and reading about them. I have to say it's a bit overwritten at times, in sort of the British smug way, because he's that way and he's gone to Oxford and to Cambridge. But it's a perfect read for anyone who's enjoyed the nature books of Mark Kurlansky, his book Cod and his book Salts and a few other things he's written nonfiction wise. Also the travel writing of Bruce Chatwin, very famous travel writer. And it even fits into the nonfiction genre that Susan Orlean did a couple of years ago called the Library Book, about the fire in the LA library that burned 3 million books that nobody heard about because it was the same day as Chernobyl. So it sort of fits into that genre of really good, popular nonfiction writing. Second book is The Second Founding by Eric Fonner, who has won the Pulitzer Prize. He's won the Bancroft Prize for History and the Lincoln Prize. And I didn't know this author when I picked up an advanced reading copy of this title about a year and a half ago. But it was the subject that caught my attention, having started rereading the U.S. Constitution during lunch breaks at Elm Street Books. And last year I hand sold it to a number of clientele, and so many of them said, "Oh, Eric Fonner, I've read him before." So it was nice to find a new historian that can read a number of books. This one covers the subject matter of the passing of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments of the Constitutions. And those being the 13th is the end of slavery and involuntary servitude, so even indentured servants. The 14th is all persons born in the U.S. are citizens of the U.S. And the 15th is the right of citizens, male, of course, to vote, and it shall not be denied or abridged by any state, which makes it very current. So it details the political fights to get all these passed, and it also brings up the Jim Crow backlash at the end of Reconstruction and how the failure of that Supreme Court failed to uphold the rule of federal law. But I highly recommend it to anyone who is an American history buff too. And lastly, is Averno by Louise. I always thought it was Elise Gluck, but she pronounces it Glick because it has the umlaut over the U. And her credentials is, she's only won the 2020 Nobel Prize in Literature. But I've been reading her since the early 70s, along with other poets such as Adrienne Rich and Elizabeth Bishop, and have never, was enamored with the confessional school of poetry, which was started by Robert Lowell and other people. It actually started further back with T.S. Eliot. But anyway, what this book is, Averno, is the title brings up the image and the fact that it is a small crater in southern Italy, and is regarded by the ancient Romans as the entrance to the underworld. And the title poem is, I think, best sums up the book. And the first line of that poem starts, "You die when your spirit dies." And under a simplicity of language and form throughout this book, she explores getting old, and you can just feel that she's about to explode and defy, I am not dead yet. So anyway, for this, I think you really truly have to be of a certain age to fully realize the flow of magma she incorporates into her poems, and it's just ready to explode below a simmering surface. So there are a lot more books in Elm Street, nonfiction, fiction, and young adult. And hope everyone comes by, supports the local bookstore, supports the library, and we'll give it back to Laura to wrap up.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. We really do appreciate you being with us. I hope that we have given you some ideas on some books to bring to relatives, to give to friends, to give to yourself, or even books for you to come into the library and ask for. You are welcome to come into the library or even go to Elm Street Books and ask for more different books. We are loaded with lots of ideas for you. Remember, I will be sending this slideshow to you. I will be sending it to you probably tomorrow morning. So look for it. And again, thank you very much. And everyone have a very nice evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for doing this with us. This was fun.
Thank you. We loved it. We enjoyed it. Keep on reading, everybody.
Yeah,
Keep on reading.
read on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good night.
Thank you, you too, Laura.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks again.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.